Representative, District 18, and I will start with Mr. Chain. You will have an opportunity to give 1 minute opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for putting on this forum. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Jonathan Chain, and I am running as a Democrat for Florida District 18, the seat that Patrick Murphy is vacating to run for U.S. Senate. I was born and raised here in South Florida. I'm married. I've got 3 kids. I've got a 5-year-old, I've got a 4-year-old, and I've got a 2-year-old. And I look at everything through the lens of the world that they're going to inherit. We see what happens when we send the wrong people to Washington. Who we elect matters. This is such an important election. There are so many challenges that we're facing here in this community. First and foremost, these horrific discharges from Lake Okeechobee into our lagoon and in this blue-green algae bloom. It's absolutely horrific. We need to elect someone who is going to buy the land south of Lake Okeechobee to restore the natural flow of fresh water into the Everglades. I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm excited to answer the questions that you have, and I look forward to getting to know each and every one of you. Thank you.
Carl Domino is not here yet. When he comes, we'll give him an opportunity to make his opening statement if he comes in before we start our questions. Mark Freeman.
Thank you very much to the League for putting this on. I run for the United States Congress because the country needs new leadership. The leadership coming out of the White House is boiling over with anger and hatred, and that is dividing the nation. Rich against poor, race against race, religion against religion. We Republicans must offer the country new leadership. Leadership founded in conscience, for the conscience is the truth within us all. And after all the lies coming from Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, the country wants to hear the truth.
Mr. Domino, come on up and we'll get back to you when we finish this group. We're doing opening statements. Maybe you got caught back time. Rick Cozell.
Thank you. Is this one on?
Yes.
Is that one on? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rick Cozell. I'm the father of a little baby girl. I'm the soon-to-be father of a baby boy that's going to be joining us in October. I'm married to a wonderful girl I went to high school with right down the road, and I'm going to be your next congressman. I am deeply worried about the direction of this country. I'm deeply worried about this community that's been my home for almost 30 years, and I'm worried about the devastating effect that Washington is having on our local lives. I got my start as a small business owner. I know what it is to create a job. I know what it is to fight to build a life for our family, and I think we need more of that in Washington. I sold my company, used the money to go get my law degree to become a constitutional attorney. I'm the only person on the stage that can actually say he's already taken the fight to the bureaucracy in Washington, and I think we need more of that. And most importantly in this campaign, I have been the candidate who is campaigning in this district, building grassroots support, raising money in the district, and this has been a huge theme in this race. I am up against special interests. The press has already started covering my opponents, one of whom is raising substantial amounts of money through special interest deals in D.C., and I'm proud that I have been throughout this campaign a representative of the community, building support in this community, and that's what I'll always be. Rick Cozell.
Brian Mast.
Well, thank you all for your time today. I'll just tell you this. I only know one way to fight for anything I fight for, and it's with everything I have. It's the only way I know how to do it. I nearly gave my life on the battlefield doing it. And what's most important in fighting for our community right now is what's going on out in the waterway, and this is how I'll fight for that issue. Number one, I'll do everything I can do to make sure I get placed on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure in Washington, D.C. And the reason is, it's because the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure handles the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who's opening up the locks, letting those dirty waters into our waterway. Transportation and Infrastructure handles the EPA, who should be raising hell about the toxic water going into our waterway. And Transportation and Infrastructure handles FEMA, who should be flipping the bill to pay for every ounce of cleanup going on in our waterway and make sure that we have clean water from now into the rest of the future. That's how I'll fight for you in this district. I'll do it with everything I can, and I look forward to answering any questions that are answered questions. Thank you.
Rebecca Negron.
Hi, Rebecca Negron.
you, Diane, for hosting this event in League of Women Voters, and thank you all for coming and listening to us this evening. This is my community. I've lived here nearly 40 years in Martin County, raised my family here, worked here as a nurse, and currently on the school board, and in fact, have paid quite a few fines to this library because my daughter couldn't seem to get her books back when she was living at home. So again, this is my community, and I know the issues because I've lived here, not because I've had to learn them, coming in from out of this district. I'm concerned, as many of the people I talk to in this community, about the country we are leaving to our children, and know that there are issues, difficult issues that need to be faced. Our nearly $20 trillion debt, national security, and other issues, and I believe I have the experience to make those tough decisions. Thank you. Juan Shuna.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Juan or John Shuna. I've been here 45 years. Originally, I'm from Spain. I have 4 children, which 3 live in Miami. They are grown up, so my daughter Alana is over here. I am a scientist. I am an engineer. Worked for decades as an engineer, and I've been an environment for 3 decades. I ran before 14 years ago in 2002 because we were being pushed to the war in Iraq, and I didn't like that. My son was in the military. My son is a veteran of the U.S. Army, and I basically for the same reasons. Okay, we had problems with there were no alternative energies. There was a lot of wealth inequality, and that was the reason basically I ran 14 years ago. I am running for the same reasons. And social issues, all right? Same thing. Still the environment is a mess in many places, including over here.
Thank
and
you.
we'll talk more about that. And thank you for coming, all right?
Carl Domino.
Well, thank you. I'm the only candidate up here. My name is Carl Domino. It's not an aspirational candidate. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is this. Most candidates are going to talk about fighting waste, fraud, and abuse of the government. I've done that. I was the only state legislature that opposed the fraudulent digital domain expenditures by the state government. Most candidates are going to talk about creating jobs. In my civilian life in this district, I created dozens of high-paying jobs, and I helped bring the Scripps Research Institute in over 700 high-paying life sciences jobs in the state of Florida. Most are going to talk about cleaning up the environment. When I took place in the legislature at the beginning, we had real problems with the Lake Worth Lagoon, and we had with the North Fork of the Loxahatchee River. I worked with the delegation to get the necessary funding so that we could clean up those waters. And finally, most Republicans at least are going to talk about lowering taxes. I fought for 5 years. You voted for portability, which is saving the citizens of the state of Florida hundreds of millions of years and laying them hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
We'll start the first question with Mark Freeman. What prompted you to run for this office?
Well, as I said in my opening statement, the country needs new leadership. The corruption in Washington, the stalemate in Washington, and the outright inertia in Washington is very bad for the country. We need leadership that will move us forward. We know that we have a problem with our economy, 1% GDP over the last 7 years, and at the same time doubling the national debt to 10 trillion. Labor participation rate falling from 65.5% to 62.5%. And you can disregard the unemployment number because that number is rigged. We have 3 million more in poverty. We have food stamps rising to 46 million from 20 million. The country is in bad shape. We need leadership that will be honest, and we need leadership of conscience.
Rick Cozell.
I think I mentioned in my opening statement, I think what we need in Washington is job creators, people that have the ability to fight for us and to fight for our local communities. And instead what we have is an insider class that's become a bubble and is totally detached from the challenges of the real world. It doesn't even matter which party you're in. We can all see that going on. The Post and TC Palm have reported this exact same dynamic in this race, and this is what I'm running against in this race. They called out one of my opponents about 2 months ago now, Rebecca Negron, who raised $86,000 in one day from employees of one company, 5 days after her husband shepherded sweetheart legislation through Tallahassee. They get sweetheart legislation, and 5 days later, they got $86,000 to her campaign account. That's what's going on all across Washington. I've had it. That is not what we need in this country. We need people that aren't afraid to fight, that aren't going to go to Washington beholden to special interests. I've asked her to return the sweetheart deal money or to explain why she thinks she shouldn't have to, and she's remained silent for 3 weeks. That's what's going on across Washington, and that's what I'm going to fight for, and that's what I'm running.
Brian Mass.
Sure, I actually remember the exact moment I decided to run for Congress. And it was as I was laying in a bed in Walter Reed Army Medical Center in a much more emotional time in my life. And I was just telling my wife, Brianna, who was sitting across that hospital room, that I didn't know how to go through life and have the best defense that I'd ever given our country be something that was in my past. And that's where I came to the conclusion that ultimately for the best that I was going to give our country to be in front of me, that it would be on another battlefield. And I thought it would be on the battlefield of Washington, D.C., if my community would have me. And I think what's absolutely needed in Washington today are people who fight with that tenacity and that ethos that we do so on the battlefield, that you realize when you're fighting for this country, you do it in two very specific ways. You do it without regard for personal gain, and you do it without regard for personal sacrifice. Because if you do it any other way, you're not doing justice to every other person throughout our history who gave their life in defense of this place. And that's how I found my way around.
Rebecca Negron.
As I said in my opening statement, I am concerned about the country we are leaving to our children. I have a reputation on the school boards for being honest and truthful. And as Rick continues to be one who is complaining about the money that I have received, I'm honored to have the support that I have from our community and around the state of Florida. And to me, it sounds like a struggling campaign. I don't know if your consultants have told you to attack me because you have a struggling campaign. You need to do something to bring up your numbers. But again, I am honored to have the support that I have, and I will never be swayed by anyone in principals' votes because I have a reputation for being honest and telling the truth.
May I respond in 30 seconds? You raised my name, if I could?
No.
There's an untruth in there. It's important. The voters need to be able to deal with this issue. It's
Mr.
deeply
Shuna,
troubling.
I will repeat the question. What prompted you to run for this office?
All right. I mentioned before that I ran 14 years ago. I was concerned with the war in Iraq. They were pushing us to the war, and we ended up going to the war. And now the same instigators, they are pushing us to the Iran war with Iran. They want to drop the nuclear agreement and things like that. That's one of the reasons I am running. The other reason, I was not planning on running anymore because if you are not well-funded, if you are kind of a neophyte, it's going to be a difficult. You don't take money from anybody. I don't take money from any bank. So it's going to be it's going to be challenging. When Bernie Sanders decided to run, or he was going to decide, thinking about running, I said, well, maybe this is the time, because I was a social democrat in 2002, and they were calling me commie. I grew up in Spain, and not for me at all.
Jonathan Chang.
Thank you. I was born and raised here in South Florida, and I want to make sure that I'm leaving my 3 kids a better place than what I had an opportunity to grow up with. You can shed such a powerful spotlight on issues that are important to people here in this community. And I think first and foremost about these discharges from Lake Okeechobee into our lagoon. We need someone who's going to go to Washington and fight for the issues that we care about here, and that's stopping those discharges by buying the land south of Lake Okeechobee. Look, those discharges destroy our way of life. 1 in 10 jobs here in Martin County are marine related. If we don't stop them, everything here is going to change. And that's why it's also so troubling that my opponent, Randy Perkins, who's running in this Democratic primary, isn't here tonight to answer these questions. Instead, he chooses to put up fancy ads on television when there are important issues that need to be answered by the people in this community. And so again, I want to thank you for being here and listening to each of these candidates.
Carl Domino.
I'm running for this congressional seat because I believe America is the greatest and most generous nation in the history of mankind. It's created more wealth for more people than any other country. It's why, following my father's footsteps, who served 27 years in the Marine, as a 22-year-old, I started a 20-year career in the military and volunteered to go to Vietnam, retiring as a commander. I'm running because I believe you need to be involved in the community, and we have been involved in Jupiter Medical Center, Maltz Men, and many others. But most of all, I'm running because I have 16-year-old kids, and I want them to have the same opportunities to achieve the American dream that I had. They're faced with burdensome taxes and burdensome regulation, and I want to go to Washington so their opportunities are the opportunities I had. So we continue to promote freedom in America, the freedom that has made us, once again, the most prosperous and the most intellectually sound country in the history of mankind.
We will begin our second question with Rick Cozell. Specifically, what do you hope to accomplish your first year in Washington?
I hope to stop the sort of sweetheart deals and dishonest politicking that we're seeing all across this country. And I'm sorry to beat a dead horse here, but I'm tired of seeing candidates being dishonest. Rebecca Negron just mentioned that support, that $86,000 represents support across this community. Guess how many of those sweetheart deal contributors live in this district? Zero. She said they represented, in another forum, she gave a different excuse. She said they represented past contributors to her school board races. Guess how many of them contributed to her past school board race out of the 32 involved in that sweetheart deal? One. And he gave her $250. $250 before they got their sweetheart legislation. $86,000 after. That is a 43,000% increase in the contributions coming from that special interest group. We're going to change Washington. We need people that represent the interests of the community, not going up there being beholden to special interest groups. That is why I'm running, and that is what my commitment is to the people in this district in this race.
Brian Mast.
Well, to some degree, I pointed out my number one issue. That's to find my way to the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure for the reasons that I already mentioned, so that I can be the loudest possible voice in that fight in Congress for what's going on in our waterways. That's the number one thing that I want to accomplish, is getting on that committee so I can fight in really the best way that somebody can fight in Washington for what's going on in our waterways. Now, beyond that, people usually ask, what's the first bill that you want to pass, or the first legislation that you want to see passed while you're up there? That's not my goal. In my estimation, a good run in my first year would be to find a way to roll back some of the regulation, downsize some of those agencies that are causing us to have to spend more and more dollars of our taxes up to Washington, D.C. year after year after year. That, to me, would be a gauge of success. If I could shrink some of our agencies, I worked for 3 of them, so I'm very familiar with the waste and the fraud and the abuse that goes on with the dollars you send up there year after year to get some of those regulations out of your way so that you can do business in just an easier and more simple way. That, to me, would be a gauge of success.
Rebecca Negron.
To me, past performance determines future behavior, and I have a reputation on the school board as being a principled, conservative Republican, and that is how I will govern in Washington, how I will conduct my business. And the person who gave me the money, by the way, is a very prominent Jewish Republican who gives to many people in congressional races and presidential races, and I will be a strong supporter of Israel, and he knows that. To me, the most important thing is balancing the budget. That is one of the issues that if we don't deal with, we are going to have a country where our children are not going to be able to pay the money that we have kept spending. So I will support a balanced budget amendment. That's one of the important things I will work on. And to me, our national security is at stake. That will also be an
Thank you.
It's very important.
Juan Shuna.
Bernie Sanders might not be endorsed, but a lot of Bernicrats, what we call Bernicrats, Bernie Democrats, are going to be elected, and I hope it's going to be a dramatic change, a leap jump in progress as far as social issues, right? I hope so, because 14 years ago there was not much of a chance, but now I think it's going to be different. Also, I've been an environmentalist for many years. I don't want to talk about the lake other than we know the problem is. I mean, we gotta get rid of the south wall and let the flow of water go to the Everglades, and I will fight for that. But also it's global warming. We got a lot of science illiterate people in Congress, including the chair of the Environmental Commission, Jimmy Hoppy. The guy is in denial of global warming. I would hope I will change it. We got only 11 scientists in Congress. That's in a body of 535 people. We need to have more scientists there.
I'll repeat the question. Specifically, what do you hope to accomplish your first year in Washington? Jonathan Chang.
As I've said before, the first thing is going to be to stop these discharges. If Rick Scott and the Florida legislature refuses to abide by the will of the Florida voters and purchase the land south of Lake O, then I look forward to taking up where Republican Congressman Kirk Lawson left off and propose legislation that's going to buy the land and restore the natural flow of fresh water into the Everglades. Again, it's interesting that my opponent, Randy Perkins, isn't here tonight to talk about it, but instead relies upon an ad that he puts up talking about that we should declare a state of emergency. Well, you know who else talked about declaring a state of emergency and did declare one? It was Rick Scott. And what's that done for us? We still have these discharges and we still have these algae blooms. But why did he do that? It's because he gave $200,000 to get Rick Scott elected governor in 2010. Rick Scott's his friend, and when he has a chance to speak on behalf of the people here, he doesn't do it. Instead, he follows what his friend Rick Scott does. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fight for you.
Carl Domino.
In my first year of Congress, I'm going to try to do the same things I've always done, whether it be my first year in the military or on the job or in the legislature. I want to win the respect of my peers, especially Republican leadership. I want to establish a sense of credibility based on my knowledge of capital markets, having done that for 42 years, my accounting background, my MBA from Harvard. I want to show that I'm a determined, hard worker. I don't come to conclusions just because that's the poll answer. I come to conclusions I do a lot of work about it. I want to show that I eschew the easy answer. These problems that we're dealing with, they had easy answers, they would have been solved already. At the end of the first year, I want to be a go-to congressman that will represent you in the areas of deregulation and cutting taxes. The only way my voice is going to be loud is if people know I'm a hard-working, credible, non-showboating congressman, and that's what I intend to be, just as I was in the legislature, just as I was in the military.
Mark Freeman.
Thank you. I think the most important thing we can establish in Washington is a culture that is obedient to conscience, rather than a culture that is obedient to dollars under the table, which, folks, is what goes on now. And if I can be a part of that transformation, then that's a huge achievement. And that achievement will lead to common sense. For common sense is wisdom. And if we have common sense, we will solve our water problem. We will stop the train. And beyond that, repealing Obamacare and having been a doctor and understanding the insurance side of medicine as well as all of the clinical side of medicine, I know what to replace Obamacare with.
Arthur, you've done this one.
Same question.
Yes. Brian Mass will start our third question. In terms of environmental issues, what legislation would you like to see proposed and why?
Well, we discussed already a little bit of the environmental issue that's going on in this area. It's the discharges of toxic waters coming out of Lake Okeechobee and coming into the Indian River Lagoon. And there's a place that we can fight for that in Washington, D.C. And there's legislation that can be put forth, and Rick Clausen has been a part of pushing forward legislation already in terms of helping what's going on with our waterway. We saw a number of our local representation up in D.C. today speaking with all of the Florida delegation up there, trying to figure out this exact thing. What can we do in terms of the environment in order to save what's going on in our waterway? And this was something that I studied very specifically up at Harvard. I had a minor in environmental studies, and I studied very specifically watershed infrastructure. And what we need to do is make sure that we're holding forth that legislation that's already in place by groups like the EPA to make sure that toxic waters aren't discharged into different waterways. The fact of the matter is, if that were oil sitting on top of our water, we would have the EPA down here and FEMA down here with a dozen different federal agencies spending every resource necessary to get every drop of it cleaned up.
Rebecca Negron.
Washington needs to pay its fair share to help us stop the discharges from Lake Okeechobee. They passed the CERT plan in 2000, and so far, out of the 68 projects, none have been completed. The C-44 canal, which will store millions of gallons of water, is to be completed in 2020. We need to make sure that the money that Washington spends and sends to us, the projects are completed under budget and on time. We need to make sure that the Army Corps of Engineers continues to strengthen the dike so that Lake Okeechobee can hold more water. And one of the things to me that needs to be addressed in Washington is things like the Army Corps, who can make decisions without any oversight. One of those, to me, that we should share responsibility of the releases from the dike with the Army Corps and be able to help stop this.
Thank you. Juan Shuna.
Well, let me split the issue of environment into big parts: the national issue and the local, the state issue. Of course, at the state level, the most important issue is the one with the lake, and it's not increasing the capacity of the lake. That's totally absurd. But I don't have the time now to go into more detail about that. But we need to, and I am not talking about buying the land. We don't have no reason to buy the land. There is eminent domain that this is a major catastrophe, and we need to take the land, appropriate the land, expropriate, whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying, leaving them without nothing. I mean, we need to pay for the land a fair value, or give them, swap the land for another park, maybe another Florida state park, that we can swap the land where there is no that danger. But the water needs to go south. The other issue, yes, at the national level, is the CO2. CO2, I've been writing about that for 40 years. You can check my websites. Go to suna.us, and from there you can go to all my websites. I got 4 websites dedicated to environment and global warming.
Thank you. Jonathan Chang.
Look, we need to buy the land. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's what we need here. We need to buy the land. We hear a lot of different things about funding SERP, about passing SEP. Those are all important things. But we need to stay focused on buying the land, because that's the hardest thing to accomplish. And if we start getting distracted by all these other things, it won't ever happen. We need to stay focused on what the most important thing is, because if we don't buy the land, but we do all these other things, it does nothing to stop the discharges. And so to make all those things a success, we have to buy the land. And it's again another reason why I differ from my opponent, Randy Perkins, because he talks about rebuilding the dike. He talks about in his blog post about passing SEP and funding SERP. And he spent 10 words on buying the land. In his fancy ad, he doesn't say the words buy the land. I'll fight for that.
I'll repeat the question.
I know, I think, go ahead.
In terms of environmental issues, what legislation would you like to see proposed? Carl Domino.
As your congressman, a couple of things I would not do is like many have done, the grandstanding with the bad water. We know there's a lot of bad water out there. The finger pointing. We've got to work together on this. And you know, when you ask what you would do, it's sort of like a field goal kicker with 2 seconds to go and his team's down 14-13. What do you got to do? You got to kick a field goal. That's the answer. How do you kick that field goal? It's a process. And I would point to three things that I would emphasize. The first is we've got to get the representatives from the other states of the union to understand the importance of this issue, and it has national implications, because to get money out of Congress and Washington, it's got to be a unified effort. Secondly, we've got to impress on the state. Our leadership had an opportunity with Amendment 1 money of $700 million to do some of this. They chose not to do that in Tallahassee. We've got to change that. And third, I'm uniquely positioned to talk to the next President of the United States, Donald Trump, because he's a friend of mine, and we talk about many things. Mine is a voice, and we're here on cleaning up the environment.
Thank you. Mark Freeman.
Well, I'm the only candidate who has actually offered a practical plan. The plan is that each sugar company lease, not sell, lease 20,000 acres each, and that state and federal dollars come in to pay them about the same number of dollars they would have gotten for running sugar on that land. Because there can't be any finger pointing here. Unless we have a spirit of cooperation, this will never get done. With a spirit of cooperation, you can have a unified effort, and that will get it done. So we need some cooperation from everybody. Everybody must be at the table.
Rick Cozell.
You know, it's been said a few times already tonight, but we need to implement CERC. We need to begin moving the water south. We need to reinforce the Herbert Hoover Dike. We've got a process in place, and we've got mechanisms in place to get this problem solved. The real key is Washington is not doing what is already in place. We need people that are going to hold that bureaucracy accountable. And I don't know how many times I have to say it, but that's what's at stake here. We need somebody that's going to go up and is going to hold Washington's feet to the fire. That being said, I cannot really look the voters in this district in the face and promise I'm the right guy to do it, and then stand by and watch the same sort of dishonest things going on in this very race. Rebecca Negron is on her third excuse of the night. First, she said that the money came from the community. Then she said it came from her school board race. Now she says it's because she's a strong pro-Israel candidate. She was in the race for a year before that sweetheart deal. Guess how much of that sweetheart deal money came in the first year? Zero. Guess how much came in one single day after the sweetheart deal? $86,200. My commitment to this district is I will hold Washington accountable when it doesn't do what it says it's going to do, and that is my commitment to the district, and that's how we get this done.
We'll start our fourth question with Rebecca Negron. What other issue is a priority for you when elected?
Being on the school board, education is important to me. I have 3 kids who went through the public school system here, and I believe that that is something important to all of our country. And I believe that Washington has no business in the education business. We need to get rid of the Department of Education and return it back to parents, classroom teachers, and the community. Those decisions need to be made by them, because our education system in the scores, reading scores compared internationally, we're 24th, we're 36th in math compared internationally, and I know that we can do better, and we need to.
Thank you. Juan Shuna.
Right. For me, the most important issue, or one of the most important issues, is to bring back the middle class. If you look at maps of the wealth distribution 4 decades ago, was kind of like this. This is the rich people, this is the middle class. Right now it's something like this. The millionaires became billionaires, and the middle class is almost all of us. So I don't believe in trickle-down economics. I believe that the best way to promote business, and I mean, I am a businessman, I am an engineer, but I founded 3 software companies. I think the best way of promoting business is really give the people some money to spend, some disposable income. That's the best. For me, that's my major concern. The second concern, as I said before, is CO2. Right now it's 400 ppm. OSHA says that 1,000 ppm is toxic. And at the rate that we are going, we're gonna get there in 150 years. I don't have more time with that. I'm sorry.
Jonathan Shane.
We live in the third oldest district in the country, and I think a lot about our seniors. My mom and my dad, when they retired a few years ago, they relied on their Social Security to make ends meet, and it was a struggle for them navigating the healthcare system, the insurance system, and finding an affordable place to live. But the one thing they could count on each month was their Social Security, and I'm going to fight each and every day to make sure that we're not balancing the budget on the backs of our seniors. I'll fight every attempt to try to privatize or voucherize Social Security and Medicare. If anything, we need to expand Social Security to make sure our seniors are not having to make a choice between a wholesome meal and their prescription medications.
Carl Domino.
For 7 years, the other party, if it moves, tax it. If it doesn't move, regulate it. And the results have been, we have the worst job creation and the biggest stagnation of wages in the history of the Republic. The Clinton administration wants to do the obvious answer, more taxes, more regulation. Donald Trump and I would have less taxes and less regulation. With the we have the lowest participation rate since the Carter administration. We have middle-class people trying to start jobs, and I work with them all the time, that pay $200 or $300 a month for what they consider adequate health care, now $1,100 a month with $5,000 deductible. These people are giving up. They are getting jobs. They're getting jobs at fast food places for under 30 hours, and most of Obamacare hasn't come. Jobs would be my number priority, and we've got to lower regulation, lower taxes in order to get good-paying jobs for our middle-class citizens.
I will repeat the question. What other issue is a priority for you when elected? Mark Freeman.
Repealing Obamacare is very, very important. At the heart of our entitlement problem is our medical bill, both Medicare and Medicaid. Now, I've worked for 20 years in a system in which we have cut morbidity and mortality by 1/3. I've been in the trenches doing it, and it can be done. With preventive medicine, I wrote a 50-page white paper that explained how it can be done. And the answer is not just to slogan repeal Obamacare, but we have to have an answer beyond Obamacare. And I know what that solution is. I've lived it, I've done it, I've worked in the trenches for 20 years. I know exactly what has to happen. And we've cut morbidity and mortality by 1/3, which is a major achievement. Not a flash in the pan, we've done it for over 20 years.
Rick Cozell.
Well, I've talked about accountability tonight, which I think is the most important thing we need to bring to Washington. The lack of accountability is manifesting itself in an unaccountable government, and we need to be reining in the federal government. For me, that's what this is all about. $4.1 trillion a year, the president's last budget. $1.8 trillion in red tape every year. A socialized medical system that is crushing 320 million working Americans. Working communities are hurting. Working families are hurting. I was the first person in my family to have a chance to go to college. Thank God for my parents' lifetime of hard work. I built a small business to get my family on its feet. America is supposed to be a place where American families can build a better life for themselves. And an unaccountable Washington is crushing us. And that is completely unacceptable. We need to rein in the federal government. We need to return power to our local communities. And we need to empower working families and communities right here on the ground to build a healthier local community and to build better lives for themselves. It's my #1 priority.
Brian Mast.
I don't think this will be anything that surprises people, but for me, beyond what I've already mentioned is reform of our Department of Veterans Affairs. I dare say that nearly every person in here either spent time in the military, has a child that served in the military, or a parent or a grandparent that served in the military. And the treatment that they're receiving from the Department of Veterans Affairs is not what they deserve for their sacrifice and their commitment to giving everything they have in defense of this country. And my priority will be reforming the VA, not just because I'm serviced by them, but because nearly everybody that's my friend was serviced by the VA. The people that made me want to serve in the first place were serviced by the VA. I want to make sure that they're getting everything that they deserve. Now, beyond that, I can tell you this, as much as I hope I reform the VA, as one person, I'm not going to be able to guarantee that. So the one thing that I can guarantee is that for each one of you, that if you have a problem or an issue or your neighborhood has a problem and you reach out to my office and you need me, that I be the loudest possible voice that I can be for whatever it is your problem is. And that's how I can be accountable to you. And that's my priority, being accountable to you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in appreciating the group that we